Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for another edition of the Moving Beyond the Coronavirus Economy series that we started here just over a year ago. And I am so excited to welcome our guests today. In fact, I finished reading your book, so I'm excited for you to talk about just doing business as partners and partners in life and in business, I should say. So we have Justin and Kristen Deese with us, and they have been business partners for decades, married for decades, and doing it all together and maintaining that healthy balance. Just finishing your book, it's awesome on the trials and tribulations of going through that. And I resonate with you on this. I do business with my wife as well. So it hits close to home, and I know that it does for a lot of our clients as well. And so I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation. And with that being said, I'll turn things over to you and take it away.
Yeah, awesome. We're excited to be here. So thank you for allowing us to be here, hanging out with you and with your audience.
Thank you.
All right. Bear with me one moment while we get the screen share set up here. Let's make sure we can see it. There it is. Okie dokie.
There we go. All right. Tom, you got us? Can you see us?
Yeah, I can see it. Perfect.
So really what we wanted to talk to everybody today about is one portion of owning a business, which is systemization and being able to create that consistent and predictable and desirable results that we want to get over and over again in our business. So that's basically the topic that we're going to talk about today. But before we get too far into that,
so
who are we?
Tom gave a little bit of a description. So, and I always feel old when we say decades. Decade. But it's true, right? And we started at a very young age. I was never, I think, built to be an employee. Like I was just never built. I pushed everything, and so in school it wasn't. I was always pushing, and then. So entrepreneurship was really the right path for me. And I think we started out a lot like a lot of married couples do, which are, I've got this entrepreneurial seizure going on that I want to go create this business and grow this, I would say lifestyle now. However, when we started it, it was more about chasing money than anything else. And as we kind of grew, then it, I needed help. And then, well, who's going to look after the money? And well, you'd rather your significant other look after the money because you trust your significant other. And so we just started on this path of, well, it started out with one business and then, selling and buying. And it just kind of evolved into this whole thing of where we became really good business partners. And as we kind of traveled around the country and went to events, people would ask about it, like how?
Yeah.
And that's really how the book came about. Was so many people asked how. And we thought, well, right, because we always had our quick answers, like, how do you manage that? Mm-hmm. And systems is obviously a huge part of that, and lanes. So if you have the systems and your lane, stay at each other's lane, and then you won't have any accidents, so to speak. So that's really kind of a snapshot. Currently, right now, we own 3 businesses in multiple states. We've got some other cool projects coming down the pipeline that we're doing some work with Tom on. But that's kind of a quick little cliff note version of who we are and how we got here at this exact moment. So,
but we don't want this to be about us. We want this to be about business owners and how they can learn something today in the short time that we have together. Yes. To take back into their business. So when we talk about systemization, it's basically it's what you do in order to organize the steps of a task so that you can get that consistent but yet desirable result. And systemization can be good and it can be done very well. Mm-hmm. And it also is alive in your business, whether it's intentional or not. So an example of systems done very well is McDonald's.
Obviously.
McDonald's is right. the ultimate business in systemization, just because you can go anywhere in the world and you get the same Big Mac, and the majority of them are put together by teenagers. So if you can get teenagers to reproduce the same result, then clearly your systems are good.
16-year-old kids can run multi-million-dollar businesses. And I think it's why so many of us look towards that type of systemization company, and are just in awe of it for that reason.
Yeah.
Can I take one step back?
Sure.
Before we go any deeper? So as everybody spends some time with us, I know that we all have a ton of stuff to do and everybody's busy. Here's our commitment to everyone here watching. We promise that by the end of the show, you're going to be able to take something back to your business and implement. So this is not going to be a lot of talking at you. It's going to be, we're going to talk about one thing, and you're going to be able to take this one thing into your business and start implementing it, which is write a system. So if you hang tight with us, I promise you it'll be worth it.
We'll make it worth it.
We'll make it worth it. We'll make it worth it.
Okay, so I think the trick, going back into the systemization, the trick with systemization is the systems are already in the business, and a lot of times what happens is they've been set up unintentionally, and we're just reacting to, or almost a victim of, our unintentional systems, as opposed to being proactive and deciding what we want in advance and taking the steps in order to make it happen. Systemization feels like this big, huge project, this thing that's almost too big to even, tackle. Like, where do I start? And how it's complicated and all of that.
So I feel like the elephant term, like how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? It's the same thing with a system. It's not, you're not going to systematize your whole business overnight.
Right.
You're going to take it and chunk it into
little pieces at a time. So it's not hard. When you break it down one system at a time, it's not hard to do. And systemization also sometimes is confused with your employee handbook, and the employee handbook is different than systemization. Your handbook is like basically your HR. We're talking about the systems on, how do we make happy customers? How do we create these consistent results? How do we keep happy team members? What image are we presenting to our customers and our community? So those are all in line with what systemization is. Now, I personally love this part of the business. I am a very organized person. I think very logically, and Justin and I work well together in that way because he is the visionary of the two of us. And so he comes up with these grand ideas, which is fabulous, but then somebody needs to come behind him and kind of clean it all up and get it organized. And that's what I do. So basically what I've done, and I've done this to help other business owners too, is I've created a system to create a system.
Sounds very OCD, but
basically there's 4 steps. So you're going to discover what systems need to be written in your business or created in your business. You're going to create them. Then you're going to implement them. And then you're going to evaluate the performance of the system and see if there's anything that needs to be tweaked or updated or changed once you've implemented it. Now, again, we've got a short amount of time today, so we're only really going to focus in on one of these steps, which is going to be the most impactful for you at this moment. And that is going to be step number 2, which is create.
So I think back to when we first started making a system, and we started making a system because my phone would ring thousands of times a day. And that's obviously not true, but that's what it felt like. And I swear 50% of the calls were the same calls. And that's kind of how we finally started, is you made me sit down and say, okay, let's create a system so we can stop that. And then we can use our time to do other things.
It comes down to digging down and pulling back and figuring out what the root problem is and solving the root problem, so that we're not constantly just putting a Band-Aid over the same situation that's happening again and again, which is what's important with systems. A lot of times we get asked, where do you even start in starting where do you start eating the elephant, basically? So there's 2 places. The most common place is to find your biggest frustration that continues to happen over and over again, like answering the same questions over and over again. Start there, fix that problem with the system, get it implemented, get it evaluated. And that is going to free up a lot of brain space and a lot of time in order to be able to start tackling some of the other things that aren't quite as annoying, but are still very important.
Well, and I think for systems that, as an entrepreneur, and a lot of us out there, we're going, right? We're busy. And sometimes we forget that busy is not profitable. And so we end up burning all this energy on busy, not thinking about profitable. And the truth is you owe it to your employees to have systems. Your employees, believe it or not, they don't come to work to not do a great job. I know that sometimes we feel like, why are they even showing? A lot of them just genuinely don't know. And I was bad about this. I knew what needed to be done. So I just assumed
everybody else
just assume, well, of course that needs to be done. Everybody knows. Well, no, everybody doesn't know that. So, so this is why it's so important to give yourself the freedom to kind of keep moving and grow.
Right. Most of the things, so one of the things that we do in general is we do business coaching with other businesses to navigate a lot of the same things that we had to navigate, and hopefully in a very shorter time period. We want their learning curve to be shorter than our learning curve. So systems is one of the things that we teach on a regular basis, and we've created a worksheet for making your system template, because one of the things with systems is that you create your template one time and then you can just reuse that template over and over. So we've created the worksheet in order to be able to help kind of stimulate what needs to be part of the system.
So for everybody on here too, at the end of it, you'll have a way to reach out to us. And if you send us an email, we'll be happy to email this. I know it's kind of hard to see, but we'll actually email you the form that you can take and use and implement in your business.
Right.
Well, great. And this is Tom. I'm jumping in really fast. I was just going to ask to make sure that how the attendees can get that. So perfect. So hang on till the end. You'll get the contact info to get the sheet because it looks amazing.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so we're going to run down the worksheet. I know that you guys don't have it necessarily in front of you, but you will be able to get it towards the end. And so just bear with us as we go down through it. But really what we're looking at on the worksheet are what are the components of a good system. And the first one is going to be, what are you going to name it? Naming a system is important, especially if you're storing the written documents online, because you want to be able to search for it and find it in the future. I can say that countless times we've recreated the wheel because we couldn't remember what we named the first system and we couldn't find it because we were trying to be a little bit too clever with our naming, and file naming. Creative file naming isn't what
getting
we want
too
here.
fancy. Like stick to the basics. Yeah, we would get too, and that's typically me. I'm typically trying to be fancy one. Well, today this feels like whatever, and just simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. We're actually going to pick one system today, so that we can kind of go down this worksheet, just so you can kind of get an idea of what it would look like to use the sheet. So, what system do you think would be a good one for this example?
I mean, there's a good chance everybody on here is a business owner. So let's say sales. Well, okay. So sales is a big one.
Yeah.
So let's say delivery.
Okay. So you've made the sale.
You've made the sale.
And the person has said, yes, I want your product or your service. And now what do we do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Let's do that.
And so what would we call that?
Sales delivery.
Sounds easy enough. Okay.
I mean, I could make it more complicated.
Definitely could. So, why is the system important to the overall function of the company? We include this in all of our written systems, not just in the worksheet part, because I think it's important for the people who are running the system to understand how it fits into the grand scheme of the business. When somebody understands this one little thing that they're doing and how important it is to the rest of the business, then it creates buy-in faster.
Well, people are not robots. And the more they understand the vision or the bigger picture or any of that, the way easier it becomes for them to get on board with it. Because, the old days of because I said so doesn't work anymore.
Right. And we hear a lot too, and we experience this ourselves, is working with millennials. This particular portion is really important for that generation because they want to understand what it is that they're doing, how it fits into the bigger picture, and how it affects everything else. So I think it's important to keep this portion and to really include it in all of your systems. Yeah. So for our delivery, why is it important?
Well, the biggie is consistency for a customer, which you could probably use that argument for really any system, but that would be the biggie. And to keep them coming back, because really when you think about sales delivery, that's the customer facing normally, like all the other parts of the sales off the top of my head that I can think of
behind the scenes,
or normally behind the scenes. Once you get to that delivery section, how do I deliver my product or service is customer facing. So if you do it right, consistency, yes. And two is that you'll keep them coming back, right? And customer acquisition costs are just, they're going up and up and up and up. So the more you can wow your customer with whatever it is you're doing, the more they're going to come back, unless you spend on marketing. So
yeah, and the consistency comes with, if we wow them the first time and they have a level of expectation now that we've created for them. If we come back the second time and we don't do the same thing in the same way, then they're going to be like, well, wait a second, I was expecting this thing that happened this first time and it's not happening the second time. So the chances of them coming back now for a third time are probably pretty slim. So that would, obviously we would try to like that down in terms of words, but the point would be, okay, cool. Why is consistency and delivery important?
So I in my head, I'm thinking big, like companies that have a sales team, but even if you're a one-man operation, it's still good to have, well, first of all, they still need systems, even if it is one person, even if you don't plan on selling or whatever, but it's to remind you of, okay, what is my process? Because you can't remember everything. So even if it's a checklist. So really, whether you're a one-person operation or 100-person operation, any of these systems, and especially this one, is
they all important. Apply. Yeah. Okay. The next little section is who is going to execute the system and who is ultimately accountable for making sure the system is done. Sometimes this is the same person and sometimes it is an employee manager situation. So like maybe,
salesperson versus sales manager, or
yeah, like maybe there's a certain email follow-up thing that has to happen after you've closed your sale, and the salesperson is responsible for like actually sending out the email, but maybe the sales manager is overall responsible for making sure that it's happening, even though they might not be the one physically sending out the email. So sometimes it's going to be the same person, and sometimes it's different, and you want to be able to identify that basically.
And they both need to understand the system so that they know who and what.
Yeah. The next one is when or how often is the system going to be executed? There's two times that a system gets executed. There's a routine system, like checking the mail happens every day. So that's routine. Opening and closing the office happens every day. So that's routine. But there's also trigger systems that happen. The system only starts when something else happens first. That could be answering the phone. That could be your service delivery. You're not providing a service until somebody has said, yes, I want it. So there is going to be a difference between the routine and the trigger. And if it's a routine system, you just want to identify when it gets run and how often. The next one is tools and resources. What tools and resources do you need to execute the system? So depending on what this is, it could
so for sales delivery, let's say that you're in-home service and you present on an iPad. Well, you need an iPad or an iPhone. Maybe you email and you use a certain software that you email out and the customer responds to you. Well, you need to level it out, because it's amazing how many times you'll have the system built and then you'll tell someone about it and then they go to execute and they're like, well, but I don't have
access to this, or I don't, I'm missing a piece of the system or whatever. So sometimes this is also really helpful too, when you're, if you're creating a new position and you're trying to lay out what somebody is supposed to be doing. This particular question right here is really helpful to make sure that when you bring that person in, they already have access to what they need to have access. So we're not scrambling around trying to get them like logged into stuff and get the resources that they need. Okay, so then we've gotten through all of that part of it. Now we have the actual system itself that we need to kind of draw out. And this is when we encourage business owners to think outside the bullet points, right? There's a lot of ways that you can do step-by-steps on systems. You can use flowcharts, you can use pictures and screenshots, you can use videos.
Use Zoom,
you can even use video, like we've done pictures and systems of what it shouldn't look like.
Yeah.
Along with what it should look like, just because everybody learns different. And the more interesting and attractive you can make your systems, the more people are actually going to look at them. And some people will look at a bullet list of words and it doesn't click, and some other people need to listen to it, or they need to watch a video on it, or they need to see it in pictures or whatever. So McDonald's, again, their systems are on little picture cards in the kitchen, so you know exactly what the ketchup looks like, and you know exactly what the mustard looks like, and that's part of how they get it to happen every single time the same way.
Yes. I do think it's important sometimes to show the how not to.
The how not to.
Just because so we had one of the service companies that we sold, our general manager at the time was having a difficult time getting people in uniform. And I couldn't understand, like, how does that,
Yeah, the uniform.
how do you not, that seems pretty, like McDonald's, those kids show up. And so what we did was we took a mannequin and dressed them up and put them out the door. So anytime they walked in, it was very clear what uniform looked like.
His name was Manny.
But then what happened was they still weren't doing it, which obviously at this point I knew was a leadership problem, not a team member problem. But I made a video, and I shot it at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was right before a meeting, and it was about what uniform is not. So I took Manny, shot a recording, put his hat on sideways. Is this in uniform? And I did it like the Dora expert. No. Okay. Well, his shirt untucked. Is that in you? No. Right. So, and the guys laughed and they talked about it forever. But then when they came in, it was like, don't be a Manny. Mm-hmm. And so it changed this whole culture just by this video. It probably took me 15 minutes to make, at best 15 minutes. And all of a sudden there was less of an issue with it because no one wanted to be that guy. Like even Manny knows what it looks like, and he's not that smart. The rest of you guys are super smart. So
right. Yeah. I mean, we have fun with them, and they don't have to be like stuffy lawyer system things. You can have fun with it as long as you're getting your point across, and you're getting the desired result that you want. Okay. The last thing that you're going to do after you've pulled all of this stuff together and you've put it in the format that you want to put it in, and you're ready to test it, basically, you're going to give the system to somebody who doesn't necessarily typically do that task, and have them follow the system and see if they can follow it. If they have questions, if they don't know what to do, if they're confused, then you know that you need to go back and make some tweaks so that it is a little bit more clear. The part where a lot of times we fall short as business owners is we go through all the work and we make the system, but then we fall short on the implementing. And then again, we fall short on evaluating it. That's step 3 and 4 in our systems process. We fall short in evaluating it to make sure that it's actually getting the intended result. So we want to test it when we can, and then we want to see how it's performing. And then we want to be open. We want to make an open environment for our employees to come back to us and say, hey, I know you made the system and it's great and everything, but this one part, it just isn't working right, or just something's not right with it. Can we fix it? As opposed to it's my way. I know it's inefficient or looks stupid, whatever.
Well, and typically, the other thing is, I think a lot of owners think that they have to do all this, and that's not the case. Let your team, whoever's doing it, let them do it. Now, I will say this: if you go to your team and you're like, write down everything that you do, they're all going to think they're getting fired. So please don't do that, or you will start losing team members. But if you're not answering the phone all the time, go to the main person who answers the phone and say, hey, listen, I'm trying to create a system. So as we hire and we grow, we're consistent on it. Can you help me with it? And they'll be happy to do that. But if you don't explain the why, and you start ramming everybody with, let's do all these, they're going to think you're getting rid of them. So the other thing is too, on the systems, as you get started, and I think most people, when they tackle this kind of project, they go, oh, I'm going to go after this big one. Do something small. Do these 3. Open your office, close your office, and answer your phone. There's 3. Mm-hmm. 3 quick systems you can knock out. And once you get those little wins, then you start to take a little bit more and a little bit more, which is pretty cool. And
okay, so they don't necessarily have to be complicated. Yes, there's going to be systems in the business that are multifaceted, like onboarding, onboarding a new person. Yes, that's going to be a very involved system, and that even gets broken down into chunks. But in general, systems don't need to be overly complicated. And we have found that what works well with in our business in terms of this also works well in our home and with parenting. So we have created some systems with our kids in order to help make things run more smoothly in the house. And we got the kids buy-in when we created some of our systems. So one of them that we did when they were little was a trash system.
Yep.
We would get so frustrated because we'd be like, take out the trash. And to us, it's super easy. You take the trash outside, you put it in the can, and you move on with your life.
In the can.
Not around.
Then you come back and you put a liner.
And every time we would say, kids, take out the trash, they didn't do one part of it right. And we were just like over and over and over again. And it's like, you know what, these same things happen in our business and we get frustrated, but we're not telling them exactly what we want. So it works the same way. So we sat down with the kids and we had them help us make how to take out the trash system.
Yep. They had to write it and find the pictures.
They had to find the pictures. They had to go through some of the pictures they took themselves. So they would go through and do the process and take pictures so they could put it in their form. But basically we said, okay, why is it important that we take out the trash? And their answer was, because we don't want to live in a hoarder home, right? Like we don't want to have bugs. All right, cool. That's a great reason to take out the trash. Where are all the trash cans? Well, let's walk around the house and figure out where they all are and write them down. Who's going to be responsible for doing it? The kids are responsible for doing it, right? Like we went through this whole thing. This is what it looks like when it's done right. This is what it looks like when it's done wrong. And once we did that and they were part of writing the system, there wasn't a conversation. Yeah, there wasn't a conversation about what's expected anymore because it's right there.
Well, and when you did have to have a conversation, it was easier. And again, this is the trash in any system whatsoever. You're not, I used to get so frustrated, but now it was like, well, ability or willingness is typically what I look at whenever somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do. And what happens is when you have your systems such as this, you can tell, is it ability or willingness? The kids have the ability to do every one of those steps. And you can say, hey, do you have the ability to do it? Absolutely. Now at the time, could Addie reach the trash can? Maybe not. She had to have Zach, but then, okay, well, she's willing to do it, but she doesn't have the ability to open the can. And it becomes the same thing to where now when it wasn't done right, it wasn't this crazy frustration. It was, hey man, before we talk about it, go look at the system real quick and then come back and tell me what you missed. And then boom, it was done.
Mm-hmm. It made it easier.
Yes. Made it easier. It wasn't perfect.
No.
Wasn't perfect, but it definitely lowered that. Again, we're talking about this system, but this is the same with any system in the business.
Well, and this particular system is easy, but we wrote it for 80% of the time, right? Like you write a system for how it should go 80% of the time. There's always going to be things that come up that are different. Sometimes something happens differently sometimes. Like for example, what we didn't include in this system was what happens if the outside trash can is already full. Then what do you do with the trash bag? Well, that happens, once in a blue moon. So we didn't feel it necessary to put it in the system because we can deal with that thing that happens every now and then. We wanted to capture how you do it 80% of the time in the system. And that goes for all of the systems that we put in the business as well. It is absolutely impossible to write a system for every single possible thing that could happen in your business on a day-to-day basis. So catch the 80%.
Well, and you would drive yourself crazy. Like I think about when we wrote the uniform policy and the company, and it was, what all do you need to do? And, do you need to tell them to tie their shoes? Well, no, because tying the shoes directly affects them. So you don't have to write that. If they trip because their shoes aren't tied, it affects them.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Hopefully that example is good to see that it's just, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be, that probably took us an hour to write it just because we're having fun with it, but.
Yeah. So properly documented and executed systems are the difference between you owning your business and your business owning you.
That's a fact.
Okay. So that puts a bow on a very short snapshot of systemization in your business. So we can open it up for questions and answer. And also, if you would like a copy of the fillable worksheet for that system template, you're more than welcome to email myself, Kristen@businessspouse.com, and I'll be happy to send it to you.
And also, if you're interested in the book, if you go to businessspouse.com, you can pick it up there or Audible. It's on Audible. I will say, if you get it on Audible, as you can probably tell, I'm from the South, so I have a little bit of drawl.
We read it ourselves.
and I had to read it really slow. So I always tell people, if you download the Audible and listen to it, you have to turn it up to like 2.0.
For you.
No, yeah, to listen to my part, because I have to talk so slow because I have a little drawl.
Well, this was awesome. Thank you all so much. And I'm thinking we may have to have a follow-up for the next steps in the process here. I think that would be a fun little series here. Well, for the folks that are on the line, feel free, if there are questions, either type it into the chat box, the Q&A, or just raise your hand. We've got a small group. We'll unmute you and you can just ask your question directly, whichever makes sense for you. Thank you, Brian, for the great presentation. Appreciate that. Anyone else? And actually, as we're waiting for folks to maybe chime in, I love that example you gave of your kids using the system. My wife and I have 3 kids in grade school. You'll be getting an email from me, and we're going to do this as a fun weekend exercise project for the kids. We're having the same conversations in our household with some of our kids here.
I did the same thing recently on cleaning your room and what a clean room looks like, because my idea of a clean room and their idea of a clean room is very different.
Light years apart.
So, and I actually ended up laminating that one and turning it into a checklist so that they could reuse it over and over again. And they take it up to their room and they go down through and check everything off, and then they bring it back to me when they're done. So, and we have teenagers, like it still works even when they're big kids.
Oh, my goodness.
The term system set you free, and it's true for really any sense of it. I mean, anything you want done a certain way, whether it's whatever, at home, at work, whatever, make a system for it. And it's a good way to get everybody on the same page, so there's not this confusion or this gap between your expectations and what their expectations are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and one thing you said, and this is that really stood out for me, because it's something that our clients oftentimes struggle with when they start thinking about documenting and systems and processes. They have in their mind that they are building some, military grade standard operating procedure that has to have every single nook and cranny a possibility outlined and identified. And I really like what you said. It's that 80% of the time, under normal conditions, normal things happening. I really like that as a takeaway out of this, is just a reminder, get the important stuff. And then, your people, if they aren't, I was thinking as you were talking, if they're not capable of making some decisions on the fly, or in a situation that kind of goes unexpectedly, it may not be the right team member to begin with if they can't do that, or they'll seek guidance, right? They'll call you or the direct supervisor. Someone will be able to make a decision on that. I really like that. I really like that.
And when that happens, especially if they call, so they come up with a situation that's in the 20% that isn't in the system, and they call asking for help. The first thing we do is say, what do you think you should do?
Right.
Because if we just give them the answer and they run into a little speed up in the future, the next thing they're going to do is call you immediately. And then before you know it, they're going to start calling you all the time again, which is not what we want them to do. But if we ask them, hey, what do you think you should do? Or how would you solve it, or whatever? And you give them the opportunity to solve the problem on their own. And sometimes it might not be exactly the way you would do it yourself, but if it still gets you to the same result, then cool, let them make a decision.
That's how you empower your people.
Right.
That's the deal, is you have to empower them, and systems do allow that to happen. And plus it gives them, because then when they solve that problem, and you should always make sure that they solve it, not you, but then when they solve that problem, now you just add it to the system, and you let them add it. Now they're like, I wrote this thing. We've had so many systems that we've evolved over time. We had one where a service tech put subwoofers in a van. We never thought about that. And then once that happened, it was like, you do not modify the vehicle in any way whatsoever. So, there's always an evolution of things that happen. And, what you start out with, it's a living, breathing document. It's not something that you write once and set on the shelf and never pull it off again. You've got to dust it off. Times change. Look what, so much of the country got shut down, and look how much we all had to evolve. So change with the times.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. And Brian said, I liked how you defined stay in your lane comment. He said he really, really liked that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm not seeing any other comments here, questions. So is there anything you'd like to leave with the audience before we close out today?
Thank you everybody for tuning in. And I would say, as you write your system, if you want us to look it over, send it over in an email. We'll be happy to look at it and give you some of our insight to our input to it, and get one done. Just one.
Yeah. Just do one.
Just one.
Well, thank you so much both for being here. Please, anyone tuning in and watching, send that email to Kristen to get a copy of the document so that you can start using that or seeing how you can implement it into your business. And in addition to the podcast, the webinar here, be on the lookout. We're recording a podcast together, so we'll be talking more with Kristen and Justin in the future as well. So you'll see them hanging around here. So thank you both so much. Enjoy it. Have a great weekend, everyone.